After 5 years of detailed consideration, the Vatican has released a 20-page document entitled Infinite Dignity, outlining the Church's views on transgender surgery. The declaration is unambiguous. Surgery to change one's biological sex is not to be attempted. Any attempt is viewed as a serious risk to the dignity of the person. It quotes St. Benedict in its text and says that human dignity is, quote, a fundamental principle which faith in the crucified and risen Jesus Christ has always defended, especially when in respect of the simplest and most defenceless people it is disregarded. The opinion has been echoed by other bodies, spiritual or secular. A major review into transgender children by a leading paediatrician is to warn that children who think they are transgender may in fact be facing mental health problems. Rather than beginning the process of surgical transition, children instead advised to undergo counselling. Well, I'm joined now by Joanne Lockwood, founder of See Change Happen, a diversity consultancy. Joanne, thank you very much for joining me. Isn't this very important with relation to children, that the first response should be counselling rather than assuming that they have made this potentially life-changing decision?
Thank you, Jacob, and I appreciate the Vatican jumping in on this discussion as well. So, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree that we need to do right by our young people, our children, by ensuring the services are there to support them, and that includes a multifaceted approach, including counselling, including support for parents, including support for teachers and people who look after young people. And that's where I think they've been let down over the last 5 to 10 years, where resources have not been provided to adequately support young people through counselling, through their gender identity, through the conflicts they face on a daily basis. So I think, yes, counselling is critically important in looking after our young people, but that's not to say that affirming their gender identity, affirming their concerns shouldn't also be considered, but in partnership with counselling and support.
But isn't that quite risky with people at such an early stage in their lives who may find that this isn't actually what they really want to do, and there's the risk of taking steps that are quite hard to reverse if you act too quickly?
It's certainly risky if the medical professionals, the counsellors, are not available to support those people through that journey. Many people successfully and have successfully gender transitioned at a young age for decades and decades. This is not a new thing. What is a new thing is that the medical professionals, the healthcare professionals, are not funded well enough to be able to keep up the demand that seems to scare people.
But is it all about funding? Because the numbers do seem to have risen recently, and it's hard to understand why that should have happened, except for there's been an element of propagandizing about it to try and encourage people to decide their own gender, which may not be the best thing for children to do.
I don't think there's a societal pressure to persuade people to change their gender. It's become socially less stigmatized, and I say less, not removing the stigma. In the same way we talked about in the 70s and 80s about people being gay. People were worried about people catching gayness or inheriting it or discovering because they could be gay, they would be gay. And I think we've been through that lesson of Section 28 and the history of that. And there's still this perception that being transgender, being trans, being non-binary, in some way you're broken and need to be prevented from breaking yourself. Affirming people's gender identity can be immensely validating and immensely relieving some mental health pressures that they've felt for all of their lives. So, yeah, there's plenty of track record here where many young people have successfully transitioned in the past and continue to do so with the right support.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Joanne. Thank you for joining us this evening. With me now is my panel, broadcast journalist Judita Da Silva and associate commentator at The Telegraph, Mutaz Ahmed. Judita, this is obviously a very sensitive issue, but the issue Joanne raises is about affirming, and I wonder whether that is the right thing to do with children or whether actually they need to have clear counselling first to see what the real position is.
I think that when you're dealing with a group that's marginalized and has a sentiment that being their true self is something that they've had to fight to get, there's a hypersensitivity when it comes to any discussion around the topic. But I do see that if you're more pragmatic in your understanding of what this is endeavoring to do, it's saying that if you have a child that says, I do not believe that I'm in the body I should be in, the first question could be why? What made you feel this was the remedy to whatever mental state you are existing in? And when you pursue the question why, you begin to understand the stimuli they've been exposed to that led them on a path to feeling this was the only remedy or the best remedy they believe they have. So it's not saying it's anything anti-trans. It's saying that the road to making a decision that fundamentally challenges the biological building blocks of human existence is of such gravity, it cannot be put in the hands of a child.
And that's a very fair point, isn't it, Mitas, that you want to question what is happening, whether there's outside societal pressure. I thought Joanne's point comparing it with homosexuality in the 1970s is an important one, that people have been very nervous about discussing this because of the history around discussions of sexuality previously.
I think there's more, we should be frank here. If I had said 2 years ago that these children identifying as trans had mental health issues, I would have been thrown out, I would have been called disablist and transphobic, and it turns out now, if the reports are correct, that quite a lot of them have serious mental health issues, quite a lot of them are neurodiverse, quite a lot of them, I think other research has shown, have autism and so on. And it looks as if it is an outlet, right? And some people have argued there is an element of social contagion, right? And there is an element of trendiness and so on. And the problem I have with the affirmative approach is we're talking about children here. Affirmation is promotion often for children.
And that's really important, that I think Mitas's point that 2 years ago the floodgates sort of opened, and that J.K. Rowling's played a very important role in allowing people to discuss this in a more rational way and say, do children need counselling? Are there underlying causes that are not just about gender but relate to neurodiversity, autism and so on?
I think when it comes to the word of affirmation, it comes to how it's applied. Because when a child presents with a problem this profound, that dogmatic parental approach might be counterproductive. It's a question of recognizing that there is an issue that they're battling with, that they feel this is the remedy. So you have to have a discursive approach with the child where they feel, as Joanne said, I'm in an environment where I don't feel I will be judged or made to feel that there is something wrong with me. I present with an issue that could have a myriad of remedies to it. And by having a conversation that makes me feel comfortable enough to be open, I may get to a final conclusion where I feel this is not the way I have to go. But when you immediately approach it where they feel I have to be combative to hold my position, that is where that word of affirmation comes in, means recognize the person who has this issue and treat them in such a way that they feel they're being included in the process to finding a solution.
Isn't such an extreme change bound to indicate unhappiness, though, to some extent?
It does indicate a level of unhappiness because you're saying who you are is not who you feel you should be, definitely. But then at the same time, it's also, I say, like, for instance, like when she brought up the issue about being gay. If you are, you are. It's a question, you're now dancing between nature and nurture. There are certain things, there are certain people that just are not conventional, and you have to recognize that.
OK, well, thank you very much, my panel.